It's time to move towards Kant's digital world. The host, the director, and the conductor of Kant's digital world is the famous author, professor, and a consultant, Dr. Badrul Khan. This week, Dr. Khan's guest is a well-known gentleman, Mr. Timothy Springer, who's the CEO of SSB Bart Group. Let's hear them on digital accessibility.
Welcome to Khan's Digital World. I'm Badrul Khan. We always say that we are living in an information society and we are physically living in the physical world. Just because we do so many activities in our life, we go to work, we go for shopping, we go for dinner, all these activities that we do at the same time, there are records, electronic records created for those activities. So we call it digital world. We don't see digital world, but it is there. It's around us on the cloud. So we have people all over the world have access to internet or digital technologies. So people with disabilities should have same rights and facilities like people without disabilities. So today's topic is basically information accessibility. I always felt that internet and digital technologies are blessing for people, all people, including people with disabilities. When I say people with disabilities, what are these disabilities? So I consider them two ways. One is naturally occurred disabilities, which are visual disabilities, people with low vision and the blindness, auditory, like hearing disabilities, mobility, cognitive, age-related. All these disabilities are naturally occurring or naturally occurred for individuals. On the other hand, there is another disability that I say is man-made. You can make information inaccessible. You can write information in such a language that people don't understand it. They can access to it. So today, I am very happy to have someone who has interest in making sure that people with disabilities have access to electronic information systems, electronic information, all the materials available on internet, they can enjoy just like people without disabilities. Having said that, my guest is Tim Springer. He is the CEO of SSB Bart Group, dealing with accessibility issues for the government agencies, corporations, and European countries and developing countries also. Tim, it's a pleasure to have you in our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Very good. And tell our viewers what is accessibility and why we have to have laws to control it. Is it is a humanitarian work or just that business? Why business are so interested? And please go ahead.
Sure. So the field that we're in is the field of digital accessibility, which, as you said, kind of your opening is usability, if you will, by people with disabilities. And disability is a pretty broad category. That includes people with sensory disabilities, people that are blind, people that have impaired vision, auditory disabilities, people that are deaf, people that are hard of hearing. It also includes things like mobility disabilities, people that may be in wheelchairs, people that have limited degrees of strength, limited degrees of reach. And then there are other types of disabilities as well. Common ones, cognitive disabilities, ADHD would kind of be on that spectrum as well, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. All that said, what we really think about in terms of digital accessibility is giving similar user experiences for people with disabilities. So as an example of that, let's say you had a website like badrulkhan.com as a general example, and that website has an image on it. And so a person with disabilities, let's use a person that's blind, would use a piece of technology called a screen reader, and it would do exactly what it sounds like. It would actually go through and read out the screen to that individual. So if you had an image on your page, when it got to that image, it would say, well, what do I say? How do I communicate this to someone? And behind the scenes, there's a little piece of text that you could add into the page to say, well, when I get to this image, it's a picture of Bajrul Khan, and so it would say that appropriately. And so you can kind of think of that requirement as one requirement on a very long list of requirements. And essentially what we work with companies to do is make sure that they check off all of those boxes appropriately. And then the other question is, well, why do we care, right? Yeah. It's good to do, right? It's important to do, but is there some sort of meaningful depth there? So in the United States, there are a bunch of laws that govern this particular space. They're digital accessibility laws. The most famous law is the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the same way when you build a building, you want to make sure that the building has a certain number of parking spaces and that the doors in the bathrooms are a certain width and that there are a variety of different code factors to improve access for people with disabilities. So if you think of that, in a building, you have to have certain things that you've built in. The similar sort of thing plays out in a website. You have to build certain things into a website. When you build a mobile phone application, you have to build those in. So essentially the law says, if you build those things in, you're okay. If you don't build those things in, you face some pretty significant legal risks. And a variety of different organizations out there have been successfully litigated under the ADA. So that's one law. And then outside of that, there are a variety of other laws that also impact this. Section 508 in the U.S. federal government, there's a law called the CVAA, which impacts communication as well as video. Television networks, as an example, that stream over the internet are governed by that. And then there are a variety of different smaller laws as well. So normally, most organizations we work with do it actually for a combination of two reasons. One reason, they have to do it. It's a compulsory legal requirement. But the second reason they do it is because it is a good thing to do. And so the attitude we get from most of our customers is, well, I'm required to do it, and if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to do it in a way that actually helps people with disabilities, that has a positive impact on their life. And we think that's the right framework, that it's good business to do, and it's a good idea from a legal perspective.
In the United States, President Clinton made the Section 508 as a law for any electronic and information materials. And for the federally funded project, or federal governments must follow Section 508, which is all the requirements one has to follow. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who is the inventor of the web.
Tim Berners-Lee, for sure.
And I had the pleasure of giving a keynote address in Saudi Arabia with him, and very supportive of his work, and he's very supportive of my framework. So he goes beyond Section 508, which is WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Now, and the European nations have their own, and third world countries may have, some countries have. Can you talk about other accessibility? And Canadian has their own too. So this is about making people with disabilities having fair and equal access to these electronic informations. And so share with me, you have any experience with European countries' law and any other developing countries that for accessibility principles?
Yeah, so there's two categories of things there. One category of stuff is what do the laws say, and what are you required to do from a legal perspective. And another category of stuff is what are the technical standards, and those are sort of the nitty-gritty details that you have to follow. And so at the highest level, there's actually a UN convention, which is a UN treaty called the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, which is a bit of a mouthful, but UNCRPD. And so this is a treaty that 168 countries have ratified at this point. So pretty significant number of countries have ratified it. And it obligates those countries to do certain things to make sure that people with disabilities have access to all aspects of society. So physical buildings, educational aspects, employment aspects, and then one of the things they include in there is information and communication technology. Yes. So at the really high level, that's the broadest law. And then we see a bunch of different countries that have then adopted their own domestic laws to support that law. And so the idea is in the European Union is a signature of that treaty. Individual countries have also ratified that, I believe. And so essentially what happens is then the European Union is now starting to pass domestic laws. A variety of different developing world countries have done that as well. China has pretty big developed laws here. We've seen a bunch of stuff come up in South and Southeast Asia, and we're starting to actually see some movement in Africa as well. Also some pretty good progress in South America as well. So we really see it across the entire economic development spectrum. People really realize that this is a key issue. This is something we've got to address. And when we're building society, this is something we want. We want to have a participatory society, and access to information in this day and age is a really critical thing.
I see that the world's becoming so digital, like I said, digital world. And now a person with disabilities can do online banking. And if you don't follow the accessibility laws, then, and we don't develop our banking system that way, then the person with disability cannot enjoy that facility. It's a good thing, it's a very humanistic thing to do, and it is, it is something that must be done. Even I know Section 508 is not enforced on every companies or corporations, only the federal projects that use the Section 508. Now, do you believe that all organizations, for all of their electronic information products, they should follow either Section 508 or any accessibility principles that applies and or laws applies?
So I have a complicated opinion on that. I would say that all companies should follow the law, and they should be respectful of that, and do it in a way that makes an appropriate sense from the perspective also of their shareholders as well. So if you're a private sector company, and we'll take a bank as an example, you are seeking to have a balance between a very puristic view of your legal requirements, what would sort of be 100% or perfect compliance, and the practical reality of the fact that you're doing this in a software environment, a digital environment, so 100% is a very difficult thing to do. It would kind of be like saying, well, I'm going to make a piece of software that is perfectly functional and is bug-free. And as we all know from using operating systems, right, things crash, programs break, mistakes are made. So normally what we focus on is saying you want to get a reasonable level of access, and you want a level of access that makes sense in the context of your user base, in the context of your legal obligations, but also in the context of your budget and your development life cycle and how much time, energy, and effort you can put into this. So I think it's kind of a specific answer to you, which is to say it's a little more complicated than the black and white, all companies should be accessible or not. I think companies should be very cognizant of this as a business requirement. Yeah. They should take their legal obligations very seriously, but the manner in which they discharge those legal obligations will appropriately vary from company to company. And I would actually tell you that outside of the federal government, the obligations are arguably stronger than inside the federal government with Section 508, based on some of the ways that the laws actually work. Section 508 may, however, change. It's going through some updates this year, and some new regulations will be issued.
So is it very costly for a company or agency to follow Section 508 or any other accessibility laws? Because it costs more money, and that's probably one of the reasons many of them are not doing it. If it becomes a law for every individual entity in the United States, they all have to follow. So it will be very costly for companies.
So that's a big open question in my industry, is how much does this really cost? And the answer is it depends. It varies significantly based on the amount of time you get to take and the ability to do it proactively versus reactively. So let me just kind of explain what that means. So if you take a big website, let's say you tank bank.com, whatever the actual bank is. And it's a big website, it's got a lot of complicated features, and you're trying to go back and retrofit it for compliance. That's a very, very expensive activity. And the tighter the time frames, the more it costs. In sort of a logarithmic fashion, it increases very, very rapidly in terms of cost. So if you wanted to take 5 years to retrofit it, that would be a tenth of the cost of trying to do it in a year versus like a fifth of the cost.
Very good. I have a personal question for you. Yep. What are you doing as a graduated from Stanford and coming into this business? Is it good for you? You could have done other things.
Yeah, so I got lost on my way into this business. So when you get a computer science degree from Stanford, in the time frame that I did, you go start a company. It's not a surprising thing. So we started a company doing something unrelated. I was 20 at the point when we started this company. I was 23 when I took over as a CEO. So for a while, it was just kind of interesting to see if I could do it at all, just run a company. And in the last I would say 7 years or so, we've really started to grow it into a very big and compelling business. But so far, so good.
Well, thank you, thank you. Viewers, this is a very interesting idea that our kids in college should be thinking about doing some humanistic thing. Like this Section 5 word means accessibility. People with disability having access to electronic information is a really, really good thing to do. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Thanks again.